If your needs are high, the amount of money you're going to need is even higher. So if you keep your needs low, you can really manage your money in a way that will set you up for freedom, both financially and just being able to live your life the way you want. So yeah, it really is a tool, in my opinion.
Welcome everyone to KEAL, where on this channel we focus on speaking about personal finance, development, entrepreneurship, especially for virtual entrepreneurship. And in this episode, I have the pleasure to speak about the importance of how minimalism can help change your life for the better with Jennifer Lynn. Jennifer, welcome to KEAL. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's quite an honor. I've seen some of your interviews on YouTube and they're all really awesome. So I'm glad to be here.
No, Jennifer, it's an honor for me. And I really do thank you for this opportunity to share with our viewing audience, our podcast audience, your personal journey of minimalism. And the reason that for me, speaking about this issue in particular and with our viewing audience is because it's more really about the journey, right? And how it can lead to fulfillment. Because I'm still honestly trying to wrap my whole mind around this idea of like, how does having less and doing less and, weeding out things in your life that you think are important and going through that process, how is it actually a good and necessary thing? And I've learned so many eye-opening, things from many people now speaking about this issue, how it can really lead to a fulfilling way of life. And I'm really, really doing my best in a disciplined way to change certain things that are important for me and my family, because especially if you have a family, it's important that they know about it and they're involved as well. So yeah, that's a big thing. So Jennifer, could you please start off by, tell us a little bit about who's Jennifer, why she's so special, and really why you decided to take this journey, like what we call the minimalist journey, into your own personal corporation for your life.
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Jennifer Lynn. And I just want to make you aware that I did write some notes off here to the side. So if I'm looking over here, that's predominantly why. I have a tendency to get nervous in interviews and I didn't want to forget anything. But I think what started my minimalism journey is a little bit hard to identify, because if I think back to even when I was like in early adolescence, I did gravitate towards clean and organized spaces. And I also gravitated towards like a less stimulating environment, less clutter, less colors, things like that. Not as a young child, but sort of through puberty and into my young adult life. So I think if I had to identify the where and how, it was when I was very young. And I think like a lot of millennials in the United States and all over the world, it's partially as a byproduct of my parents. My parents held on to everything that they were really given just in case it had a use or just in case they, needed it later. And they had, 5 different people's generations worth of stuff because they were taught by the generation that went through the Great Depression that you have to keep things because things are scarce. And through that sort of generational trauma, they ended up with so much excess because now we live in a world of planned obsolescence, unfortunately. And keeping onto all of your belongings just creates clutter and like an overstimulation and an inability to concentrate within your space. So I think when I started truly incorporating it into my life is when I moved out of my parents' house. Not to throw shade on my parents, I think this is very normal. But when I moved out and I started choosing things for my own space very intentionally, I noticed very quickly how much clearer my mind was and how much my space impacted my mental health and well-being. And before I even really understood the term minimalism, I just understood that less was more. And I also don't like cleaning. And the less you have, the less you have to clean, So I think that's pretty much where it started if I had to best identify it. And then looking here, Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I also like to travel, and traveling light is far easier and less expensive. So I think that's sort of a pillar to it as well for me.
So Jennifer, it's really interesting to hear your process of which got you to this point. And, it sounds like in a way like you said, you've always sort of intrinsically been like this. It's always kind of been a part of you, so to speak. And that's actually how I am in many ways too, being organized when things in order. But I'm still trying to strive as you're, creating already for yourself this kind of, minimalist journey in which you only have the right things in your life and you're leaving the excess out, which I'm really trying to do myself, being as organized as I think I am, but who knows? But do you think there's still challenges in which you really want to get to that point that is like, okay, I really do have what I want in my life and am trying to keep out the rest? Like, because you sound organized, it sounds like you're leading on that journey, but is there still certain challenges to that?
Yes and no. So I think now that the term minimalism exists and it's almost mainstream to a point, some of the more difficult challenges of identifying, structuring, and explaining kind of what your gig is to both yourself and the people around you has become a lot easier. As far as challenges, I think specifically I live in the United States, and the United States, the entire economy is based a lot around consumerism. And I think culturally, the byproduct of that has caused a lot of people to tie their self-worth intrinsically to the belongings that they have. And I still occasionally struggle with undoing some of those cultural traumas, if you will, in my day-to-day life. I think especially as a woman, there are different societal expectations put on us surrounding consumerism and stuff, makeup, hair, extra clothes, always looking interesting, sort of like the peacocking effect, if you will. And I think, like I said, I still struggle with those things on occasion when they sort of creep into my mind just through the culture that I was raised in. But I think by and large, I've been doing this long enough that I am really easily able to identify when that's happening and why, and then fix the issue of where that's coming from, which is usually tied to some sort of self-esteem that I'm struggling with at that time. And then I fix the issue as opposed to supplying the Band-Aid of just buying stuff to make me feel better, if that at all makes sense.
Jennifer, it's really interesting, like that process in which you're describing where, if something is on your mind about what to purchase, not to purchase, and going through that idea of, okay, does this affect me in this way and with this issue about my personality or self-esteem, whatever it may be. Since your time on this journey, and please remind our audience how long that's been as well, like this quote unquote minimalist journey, and what has been different and changed you, Jennifer, either something that was revealed to you, like, oh, I just found this more out about me, or I am not like this, ... whatever that is.
Yeah, so I have been doing, I guess, the official minimalism thing, I want to say for about a decade, maybe a little bit less, definitely between 7 and 10 years. So it's been quite a long time. I think I didn't really start identifying myself as a minimalist until I started creating content online. I think because the way we find our community online is through these keywords like minimalism or intentional living or zero waste or whatever it may be. So as far as identifying myself as a minimalist, I've been creating content online for a little over a year and a half. So that's about the timeline there. As far as things that I have learned about myself, I think the most prevalent is that I learned, again, going back to being from the United States and sort of that cultural norm, I learned that I truly was tying my self-worth to how I presented myself through my things, predominantly like my clothing, my car, designer bags, whatever it may be. I also noticed that I strived to obtain things before I strived to obtain life experiences and knowledge. And I think once the light bulb went off that was the way that I was living in the trajectory of my life and my mindset, it was almost like a sudden realization, like, okay, this has to change. My belongings shouldn't own me. I should own and use them. And then I don't know if anything was so striking in the beginning, but I think as I've evolved as a human, both through age, life experiences, and this minimalist journey, I've learned who I don't want to be, which is basically the person who I was kind of before this journey. So it's not so much a matter of like I am or I'm not, and I've noticed these things. It's more forming myself like clay into who I would like to become and who I think I authentically am.
No, that's amazing. And I'm also curious, like through this process, in any way whatsoever, has it ever affected your relationships with people that you've grown up with? Has it created and fostered new ones of akin spirits? How has it changed maybe the dynamics of your relationship with people at large? Because, sometimes it's when you go through this process or are trying a new way of living to discover yourself and, things that make you truly happy, that will have its own filtering process. So has that dramatically changed?
That's a really, really good question. And I am fortunate enough that the people who are sort of in my inner circle are all largely very supportive. When I first started kind of getting rid of all of my stuff, because I think that's where it starts with minimalism, is you have this mindset light bulb and then you just want to like clear out all of your stuff and sort of get started. And when I started doing that with no explanation to my family and friends, I had a lot of people that were genuinely concerned that I was struggling with something mental health wise, because I was getting rid of all of this nice stuff, things that I've spent time and money on, whatever. I think once I gave the language to help people understand where I was in my life and in my mind, that helped people come to understand what I was going through. You can't really expect to just like change 180 internally and have everybody fall into line and understand right away if you don't give them that context and language, in my opinion. So I did my best to do that. And I set boundaries, friends that I would previously go shopping with as a hobby. I set a boundary that wasn't what I wanted to do with my time anymore. And those who respected my boundaries got to stay in my life, and those who didn't respect my boundaries, just like with any other boundary, I have to protect myself first. So those relationships grew apart slowly. So for my immediate family and my closest friends, the impact was more just through explanation and then slow, gradual change. As far as how it impacts my relationships today, with some of my family members, specifically like my parents, as I mentioned earlier, who have a lot of generations worth of stuff in their life. And I think, hold a lot of sentiment to their stuff in a way that I do not. I've noticed sometimes that causes a little bit of friction because I want to help them in my mind get to where I am. And just like with anything in life, like religion, for example, you can't really force it upon somebody. They have to sort of get there naturally. And I think there was a period of time, specifically with my parents, where there was a little bit of a struggle there. And then I learned the best way, you lead a horse to water and hope they drink. So in recent years, my parents have been coming to me more for help with things like decluttering, because even though they're my parents, we both have different mindsets and different skill sets. So I think now that I'm a full adult, they feel comfortable asking my advice with things that I happen to be very skilled about, like the concept of minimalism and decluttering. My husband is the only person who I share a house with. And although he doesn't call himself a minimalist, he is also a very minimal and tidy person just by nature. So there's been no friction there. And as far as dynamics with friends today, Again, nothing's really changed, but I do have friends that ask my help for like motivation when it comes to decluttering more than in the past when I wasn't a minimalist.
Which is probably one of the biggest things that you're trying to do, I guess, in your own personal way to help other people, right? Is to understand, I guess for me in this sort of understanding is what should stay in and what should stay out of your life with meaning, right? Like an intentional way of doing it that makes sense to that person and resonates to their own personal meaning. Is that the way in which you help people?
Yeah, that's how I do like to help people. And it's just about finding the language to where you can meet them in the middle. I used to be a swim instructor, and something that I learned while being a swim instructor is that every child learns differently. Sometimes say something one way and it'll click with a certain friend, but not another, and vice versa. So if people are interested in like the benefits of minimalism, which largely people are, I think, because it's a unique level, people are interested, I'll fill their head and life with everything that I can, and explain it in a way that makes sense to them with the appropriate language. But if they're not interested, I try to not force it. You know, again, going back to like religion or spirituality or anything that's really a pillar in anyone's life, it's not really the individual's place to start forcing that on other people, even if they think it may be helpful. So that's the stance I have largely taken with the people in my life. I help when they want it, and I shut up when they don't.
Which is the best way to live, is by example, no matter what, you know? So I think your approach with that is the correct one and the most necessary one, right? Like just lead. It's impossible to change anyone, to be honest. So like the best that you can show how your life is good and you're happy, the better. I'm interested as well, as you know, and this just came to my mind as well, Jennifer, like in how in any way, because you've been on this journey for a while, but has there been any sort of impact in any way, any pivot, any realization, especially since the pandemic, that has either heightened or refocused your way of how you live your life and have already been on this journey for a long time?
So it's interesting you say that, because right around the time of the pandemic, I think a lot of people, their world was totally shooken. And even though I was still practicing minimalism at that time, I still had a halting of my life that caused a lot of introspection very rapidly. I was formerly working in corporate America. So even though I had my belongings to a minimal, I had my space very beautifully curated in a way that was ideal for my mental and physical well-being. I still struggled with hustle culture and all of the things that come with that, like burnout and, you know, what have you. And I think when I was forced to come to a complete halt due to the initial surge of the pandemic, it caused me to apply some of the mindset switches with minimalism to my life, of like slowing down and being intentional and allowing your body rest when it needs it. All of those things can be tied to minimalism, but also various other spiritualities. And very, very recently, I've been exploring my place in the world. This isn't inherently related to minimalism, more just humanity. But I've been exploring my place in the world and what I believe as far as spirituality and my purpose, and anybody's purpose, or what's the value of what we're doing here at all. I haven't exactly landed on what I believe yet, but it's a journey that I don't know would have been prompted if it wasn't for the absolute halt of my 10-hour hustle work days. And now something that I'm actively practicing is allowing rest. I don't know about you, but many United States livers, Americans that I've spoken to in my life have mentioned the concept of not feeling relaxed ever. They feel guilty when they're not being productive. I think a lot of that is just what we're taught culturally here. And I'm trying to be more intentional, not just with my belongings as it started many years ago, but with my time and my mentality. So allowing myself to slow down, giving myself permission to take a break and, watch TV and not have to fold the laundry and write down video ideas or whatever, doing one thing at a time and really being present, which is remarkably more difficult than you would think.
It's almost impossible, to be honest. And it's funny you say that, because living in Mexico, the word tranquilo always comes up. It's like, yeah, settle down, relax, but I'm still trying to adapt that. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
And, and actually the nature of my work in general, I work remotely, and, not having to commute as I did before, I'm still finding myself way busy. I'm like, my whole spiel, like you've been, to re-echo that a little bit, is since the pandemic as well, I'm trying to reorient my time better, my energy, the essence of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. And some things have definitely gotten better, but the days just fly by too quickly. I'm like, what am I doing that the days just disappear? So I'm still honestly trying to figure that out. I'm like, this is unbelievable. But, I'm really, really, really amazed and, happy that you had that realization as well, because that honestly is, I think, more and more an expectation people are having for themselves, especially learn from the times of pandemic. It's like, how can I balance my day? Everything's like about balance. How can I balance my day so I'm being productive, I'm doing what I want, but I have, there's a famous Italian, I can't pronounce the name, but he said he wrote this book about the art of doing nothing, like how
I have that it's on my bedside table right now.
All right. So I think
it's going to be such a good read.
Well, a good read and just a philosophy, because the older we get, the more we think, or maybe not even the more we think, but just sitting down with your eyes closed and not having even one single thought go through it would be an achievement. And I'm it would be amazing to try to get to that still point somehow in the future. And
it's very slow. People who have talked to me about this type of mentality have said you can't expect that sort of from the jump. It really starts with even just noticing when you're not in the present and trying to bring yourself back. If you even catch yourself not in the present, that's like step one, is noticing when you're not there, and if you have one foot in the past or one foot in the future, you're crapping on the present, and that's not really ideal. So I think even just catching it is like step one. And then 300 steps later is when you get to that nothingness that I think you're craving.
I mean, there was a period between 2016, 2018 when I was really divulged into Eckhart Tolle and Louise Hay and all these people, the power now and everything related to that whole thing. So, after going through the power now and actually practicing some of those things personally, I did have a certain blissful experience, you could say, like being in a state of nothingness, and that was great, but I never got back to it. So trying to figure all that out. But it's important when you just, what I really, really appreciate deeply about the way in which you live your life, Jennifer, and people who are really, truly dedicated on this journey is like on the energetic side and kind of the mental, physical side of everything. It is about these different equilibrii points in which you try to reach throughout your whole day, not just like, okay, I'm going to do it this one time a month, but it's a daily thing. I'm going to try to achieve this more and more every day in some way that leads gradually even deeper to a state of amazing existence. And that's something that truly am fascinated and amazed by, like the journey in which you're embracing. I think it's absolutely incredible, and important, obviously.
Thank you. That's really kind.
No, it's and it's a day-to-day thing. more than anything. And it's good, it is, because if you're willing to accept that challenge as well and have that discipline, then you're going to feel better by yourself, I can imagine, so, and I'm also interested in this other aspect, Jennifer, especially when it comes to, I guess you could call it your future self, like Jennifer, 50 years and beyond. And believe me, I'm sure you're nowhere near that. So, but generally speaking, because when I'm speaking to different people who are on this journey, a lot of it has to do with conscious, you could say, spending, right? What I mean by that is whatever your money is being dedicated to, intentionally if it's good for you or not good for you. And that could be just a material thing, a health related thing, whatever, right? There's a lot more consciality behind that, a lot more intention behind that. And what fascinates me on this other pillar of this whole idea of the path you're on is that you are trying to, in a way, save for a future self, so you don't have to worry about, being in a corporate grind till you're 7 years old and just totally dying and burning out, right? So can you talk to our audience in that regard? Like, how much does money to you on your journey mean into what you spend now and what you save for? And do you still have any urges whatsoever and go buy that new Versace or whatever it is? I don't know anything about brands, but that's the name that came to my mind.
So yes, money, I think, is a large aspect of what is important. I think a lot of people, when they hear minimalism, they assume like nomadic living, which it can. But I live what I believe to be like a normal life within the United States. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at that, money is a tool that we need to consider and also plan for in order to live within the boundaries that we're given in the society we live in. So as much as I would love to say, oh, like money doesn't matter, you could just be happy, money's not the most important. The reality is within the boundaries we've been given, money is like a very important thing. And I think minimalism is sort of the launching pad to a lot of things, some of them being spiritual, like we spoke about earlier, being able to get to that place of calm and slow and intentionality. It starts with the stuff, and then it gets there. But I think it's also a launching pad to a lot of financial literacy, and at least in my experience. It started off with buying less impulsively. And then I started noticing that I had excess money. So I started looking into what I could do with that in order to best set myself up for the future. And I know you hear like a lot of gurus talk about having passive income, but the reality is like that's very true. In the United States, the people who are the most comfortable the earliest in life they don't make money. Your earned income isn't really enough to catapult you to retirement or even like a comfortable way of living. Unfortunately, in the United States, we don't have very many social safety nets, even for our elderly or like veterans or anything like that. So what you're able to build and safeguard yourself with is what you have. And I think there's a lot of importance in that. So I've researched a lot of money literacy, and I do have a trajectory that I'm headed on with regards to money. Ideally, I'd like to be able to build my brand online through being able to help people with things like minimalism, intentional living, being healthier, all of that. Maybe launch some sort of like a course to be able to help people, a little bit farther reach. That way, if they don't have the time to watch my videos, maybe they can do a course, maybe perhaps in the future buy investment property or invest more into the stock market, just really diversifying my streams of income. And I know that sounds like the absolute opposite of minimalism, but I think with something like money, at least in my life right now, I don't take a minimalist approach. I take more of like a safety net approach, which unfortunately does require a little bit more effort and a little bit more headache. So I'd love to say that it doesn't matter, but it does. So that's the approach I take. And I haven't really found a balance with simple management because it's so not simple.
I think what's so golden about what you said is it's a tool. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that money is something not to go crazy and, like, you know, what was it, Donald Duck's uncle or somebody, the one swimming
Scrooge.
in the one swimming, the one swimming in the bath of gold and money. But for us, especially now in these times, we know now more than ever the importance of saving for your future self, the tool to get there financially, to do that for the here and later, right? And also for, you know, cash is king. I mean, if the pandemic has taught us anything in very dire economic times, if you can't make that next mortgage payment because of something that impacted you adversely with your job and what happened in the economy, holy moly, what's going to happen to this family? I think money's becoming so incredibly important as, like you said, a safety net and as a tool that's really waking a lot of people up. So I'm really happy you phrased it like that.
I also want to say, going off the money as a tool, is me, my husband, and I think most people, I don't dream of like private jets and gold-plated toilets or anything lavish.
Oh, come on.
I really don't. I just want to have enough to be able to comfortably live my life when I'm older and also support my children's needs. And unfortunately, the barrier to entry for that is just getting higher and higher. So what we have to do to sort of play the game, you know, is participate in the game, unfortunately. So I try to just use it as a tool and not need so much. You know, if your needs are high, the amount of money you're going to need is even higher. So if you keep your needs low, you can really manage your money in a way that will set you up for freedom, both financially and just being able to live your life the way you want. So yeah, it really is a tool, in my opinion. And just, I don't know, I'm not like lavish.
Well, I don't know about that private jet thing. I think anyone wouldn't mind that, but you know, who knows, you know, where you want to fly to. No, but what you're saying is absolutely great, especially about what you're expecting in the future, meaning that, you know, when I spoke to Joe and how he retired early and, you know, living out his retirement in his 50s, which is awesome. You know, one of the biggest things that came to his realization through our discussion in that interview was about expenses, right? I think if you know what debts are in your purview and what you're truly spending essentially each and every month, everything becomes easier, right? Because if you know what you dedicate towards and what are your liabilities, you're like, okay, well, if I cover that and then I have a little extra for whatever, I'm good to go, right?
Exactly. So I'm not trying to be like a bazillionaire. I'm just trying to financially set myself up with a safety cushion for my family and also the extension of my kids and everybody else. So I don't know. It's true, because I think when we talk about money, it's sometimes taboo, but everybody wants to be comfortable, and that does require money, as much as maybe that's not the ideal.
Yeah, I think me personally, I would love the safety net as you talk about, which is great, but the private plane too. If both can happen somehow. I don't know. Maybe someone will dump it in my.
That could be your dream.
Yeah, that would be mine. Someone can dump it in the front yard, say, I don't need this plane, it's useless. You can have the pilot, you can have the caterer, you can have the gold toilet, whatever. You can have all that just as a gift. If someone gifts it, fine, I'm good with that. I'm not gonna argue.
Oh, okay.
So we'll just leave it at that, you know. But Jennifer, and we only have time for one last theme as we go on the outro here, and I really do appreciate this amazing, scintillating conversation with you, and it's been so revealing and important and eye-opening and just fascinating overall. So I truly thank you, and for our viewing audience who will deeply, deeply appreciate this. My last thing I want to ask you is, can you maybe this is kind of a general question, but maybe just a couple insights, either yes or no. who's, in your opinion, minimalism right for and maybe not right for, right? Because maybe this can really work being on this path for almost anyone if they truly desire, but maybe it wouldn't work for a specific type of person either. And I don't have that idea myself personally who it wouldn't work for, because I think there's so much good in it, but maybe it's not for a certain type of person. Do you have any way to answer that, who's good for and maybe not so good for?
Yeah, I have an attempt at an answer.
Sure.
So I think, just like you said, aspects of minimalism and intentional living and all of these good things that minimalism is the catalyst for, I think can be applied to anyone's life and yield benefit, whether it's in a small amount or a larger amount where they're living sort of the whole package. I do think there are people who are not ready to get there. So when I think about, I'll use myself as an example before this light bulb moment happened that allowed me to jump on this launch pad of minimalism. I was somebody who had incredible low self-esteem. I tied a lot of my value to the way that I looked, the way I presented myself, the stuff I had, the stuff I was able to buy, how much money I had, all of these things that don't really matter. And if I think back to who that girl was before the light bulb moment, when I really started my journey of growth into womanhood, at that time, I don't think the practices of minimalism would have even made sense to me enough for them to be useful in any way, shape, or form. So I think it can be helpful to anyone who's on a trajectory of growth, and simplicity and the understanding the real value in the life that we get. But I do think there are plenty of people on this earth that aren't there yet, whether it be because they're dealing with trauma that they're stuck in so they can't get to this point of growth and development, or whether things that they've been taught culturally, they're not ready to necessarily shed yet. But that would be my answer. I think there are people who aren't ready, and they may never be there. I'm sure there are people who are much older who just will never quite get to that place. But I would say minimalism probably isn't for them because they won't have value in it, because they're not ready for it, if that at all makes sense. And that makes me sound pretentious, like, oh, I'm better than you, but that's not how I mean it. I just think different people are at different stages of growth within their journey as like a soul, if that makes sense.
It makes 100% sense, because it's almost like anything in life. You know, if you force yourself into a situation and you're really, really not ready for it, even if you have the right heart to want to be there, and you just get to a grinding halt, you're going to maybe fall into a guilt trip, blame yourself, get frustrated, anxious, mad, etc. Right? I mean, if I try to go and play, get into a minor league soccer club here in Mexico, and I get steamrolled and just beat up and whatever, trying to do that, I might have all the heart in the world to do it and keep going. But I know even if I try hard and train and all that, maybe I can get there someday, but maybe that's not even the best analogy. But my point is, I'm trying to get back to the heart of what you're saying, what the way I understand it is that you just may not be there in a certain way because of how you are, even with the best intentions you have. And that's okay, And
whatever the reason, I mean, for some people, it could be very valid. Like they have things that they need to work on before they can get to that point of growth and slowing down. And other people have maybe been taught things that they still believe. And there's no wrong way to necessarily live. It's just, I think there are some people who maybe won't take to these type of concepts just yet.
100%. Because they might want that golden toilet or something.
They might, They might have that as the value of their being.
Yeah, 100%. Jennifer, where can more people find out about you, the work you do, the way you're trying to help people? It could be where you are locally all over the world because of the age we live in. Where can people generally follow you and know much more about who you are, Jennifer, and what you're doing?
So if you're interested in following me, that would be awesome. My goal is to be able to create content to make enough money to live on, but also be able to really have a high value of what my work is in this world. So if you feel like I can help you, you can follow me on YouTube, which is just Jennifer Lynn. There are a lot of Jennifer Lynns in this world, though. So if you type Jennifer Lynn Minimalism into the search bar, you'll probably find me closer to the top. And then for Instagram and TikTok, it's at Jennifer.Lynn.life. And I talk about minimalism. I talk about mental health. I talk about decluttering, lifestyle, health and wellness. It's kind of like a smorgasbord of stuff. But minimalism is a major pillar cross-platform for me. So if you feel like that would be useful and you want to come follow me, we'd be happy to have you.
Excellent. Excellent, Jennifer. So I encourage all of our audience on the platform, podcast platform, watching on all the platforms as well. We'll include all of Jennifer's information in the show notes, in the podcast notes, in the pinned comments on all of our social platforms, and please connect with her. She is truly an insightful person, has a lot of golden things to say that help change your life. Highly recommend. And so please connect with her in all of the notes here below. And Jennifer, we are honored to have you on KEAL. We look forward to a part 2 sometime in the future. And thank you so much again.